And I said, Lord, let's get real. Is there anything in me that offends you? Think about that statement. Is there anything in me that when you see it, it offends you? And then, God, I ask you to point it out to me. I think a lot of us would like to be like, okay, God, you already know that. Could we just leave it in the background? I really don't want to think about that. I really don't want to talk about that. But I prayed that prayer, and I submit to you today that that prayer will change your life. If you really pray that prayer, it'll change your life. God answered that prayer. He shined His spotlight on a relationship in my life that I've avoided for years. It's a relationship with my earthly father, with my dad. And many of you know pieces of my story, you know pieces of my testimony. I use them in messages as illustrations all the time. The interesting thing is you can grow up in a very safe and secure environment and not have really good stories, or you can grow up in some of the environments I was in, and boy, they make great sermon illustrations. And my childhood with my father was really defined by words like abuse and neglect, loss of innocence, and broken promises. Because of things my dad did, I endured some things, and really more so because of things my dad did not do, I endured some things. Because of my dad's neglect, I lost my innocence at a very young age. I was subjected to some abuse, physically and sexually, that I shouldn't have had to face at that age. Those things have haunted me as a child and into my adult life. The Lord's done some amazing works in me. Those are words that define my relationship with the Lord. And the Lord with my dad, and the Lord brought those things up to me. And I really was kind of ticked at God. I was like, hey, listen, hey, come on. Let's talk about something else, okay? I really don't want to go here. And I wrote these words down, the words I just shared with you: abuse, neglect, loss of innocence, broken promises. Those things define my relationship with my father as a child. And then I felt like the Lord said, well, what are the words that define your relationship now? You spent 17 years lost, not knowing me. And you've spent 23 plus knowing me. What words define your relationship with your dad now? And these are the words I had to write down: distance, avoidance, lack of respect, disdain. I've tried to stay away from my dad. I found that life is better when he's not in it. Being real. You ever know anybody like that? Feel that way? I feel that way. This last year, my great-grandmother passed away. She was 101 years old. Pretty cool deal. I got to spend time with her, got to pray with her. She was ready. She was ready. I did the funeral. My dad didn't come to the funeral, but he called me, and that was not a comfortable conversation at all. I got the phone from that conversation feeling all the same emotions I felt all throughout my childhood toward my dad. I remember thinking, I can't believe he still can do that to me. My pride began to rise up. You're above that. Come on. But those emotions were still there. I forgave my dad 23 years ago. As a new believer, I learned, hey, the Bible says you got to forgive. So I forgave. And then over the last 23 years, I've forgiven over and over again. I've continually forgiven. Forgiveness is a choice. It's not a feeling. I know that. So I've done that as best that I knew how. And I felt like it was a done deal, but God showed me that it was not a done deal and that I needed to deal with it, and I need to deal with it now. I want to share with you something the Lord showed me when I was up in North Carolina, which interestingly enough is where I was born and also where I was abused. And so it was an interesting thing that I happened to be in North Carolina when the Lord began to speak to me about this. But there's a story, and I call this my 35-year grudge. I'm almost 41 years old. But when I was 5 years old, I watched my dad beat my mom in a drunken rage. And I watched my mom try to fight back, and I remember as a 5-year-old boy in my pajamas in the middle of the night watching this take place. I was in the living room. There was kind of a little dining area. Then the kitchen, they were combined. It was a small little, house there, a little ranch in California. And I remember sitting there and seeing just an angle kind of around the corner, the battle, go on, and hearing the pain and everything in me wanted to do something. Wanted to rescue my mom, wanted to defend. But I was 5 years old and I didn't even have any pants on. I was in underwear and a t-shirt. And I was frozen with fear. Like those dreams that you have when you can't run or you can't talk. But it was real. Many other things happened throughout my childhood. Many things that, we could talk about. I could go to therapy for, all kinds of things. What's interesting to me, though, is that when I said to the Lord, shine your light on anything in my life that offends you, any sin in my life, that the Lord brought this up. And I said, Lord, what part do I have in that? I was 5 years old. There's nothing I could do. And the Lord said, you've held a